Hi everyone, and welcome to your free Ornament Girl tutorial. My name is Kennedy, and today I'll be showing you how to make the Itsy Bitsy Spider quilted ornament pattern. Make sure you check out the link below the video for the bonus freebie PDF that we've included with your tutorial. This ornament was designed by Sherry, and it actually has very few folded fabric pieces. Most of the design comes from the unique embellishments, so I think you'll have a lot of fun making this ornament. In order to complete this pattern, you'll need a soft foam hemi or half-round ball, satin straight pins, fabric and embellishments, and a few different tools. Make sure you check out the link below the video to download your free printable supply list to help you gather all of the correct quantities and measurements for your materials. Once you've gathered all of your supplies, we can start making your Itsy Bitsy Spider ornament. Before we start adding any fabric to your foam, we're going to make a few marks on the foam. And what we want to do is just find the center of the round side of your hemi, and I'll show you a quick trick for doing this. With a regular piece of paper, you'll want to cut out a long strip long enough to go around the outside of your foam. So I suggest cutting diagonally from corner to corner on your paper and make a strip about 1/4 inch wide. And once you've cut this long strip of paper, you're just going to lay it along the edge of the rounded side of your hemi and use a pin to hold it in place. And now wrap this strip all the way around the foam. And when you return to your starting point, you want to trim your piece of paper so that it's just long enough to touch the beginning point. So right there at the beginning point of my strip, I'm just trimming so that now I know that this piece of paper is the exact same length as the circumference of my foam. Now you can remove your strip from the ornament, and we just want to divide it into 4 sections. So fold your strip in half one time, and this will divide your strip into 4 sections. And I'm just gonna mark my little folds so that it's easier to see in the video. So those black marks are the points where my strip was divided when we folded it in half twice. And now you're going to put this back onto your foam, just pinning it in place and wrapping it around the edge like you did before. And you're gonna make those same marks on the rounded side of your hemi. So right here where your strip stops and starts, you'll make a mark. And then at each of your folded points on that strip, you'll make a mark. So you should have your hemi divided into quarters now with those 4 marks. Go ahead and remove the paper. And now we're going to connect those 4 marks just so we can find the center of the round side of the hemi. And to do this, you can just use your flexible tape measure and use the edge of it to connect 2 opposite marks on the foam. And once you do this, you can just use that as a straight edge and draw the line connecting them both. And then do that for the other set of 2 opposite marks. And now that you've drawn those 2 lines on your foam, you know exactly where the center point of the rounded side of your hemi is at, and that will help us out when it's time to add fabric to the back of the ornament. Now with your 4.5 inch square of fabric number 1, you're going to cover the flat side of your foam. So put your square of fabric with the pattern side facing away from you down on your working surface and center your flat side of your ornament right on that square. And when you slide this off your working surface and flip it over, you can see that that fabric is now laying over the flat side of your foam. And we're going to pin this into the rounded side of the foam about 1/4 inch away from the edge of the foam where it goes from rounded to flat. And do this at all 4 corners, stretching your fabric across the flat side of the foam so that it lays nice and flat. And once you have all 4 corners pinned down, you're going to do the same with a pin in between each of them, still keeping your pin line about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge of the hemi. Stretch that fabric over the foam and pin. And everybody's fabric will have a little bit different amount of stretch to it, so just pull it as much as you need to get it to lay nice and flat over the face of the foam. All right, now you've got 8 pins in place, and you want to go around and fill in this pin line to keep your fabric nice and smooth. So I'm going to go around once, adding 1 pin between each of my existing pins, smoothing that fabric over and pinning. And once you have added all of those pins, you can go around one more time and add a couple in between each of the pins. So you can add about 2 or 3 in each of these gaps between pins, and remember the goal is to keep smoothing your fabric over the flat side of the foam as you go around and pin. Once you've worked all the way around the ornament, pinning down that fabric, and it's laying nice and smooth over the front of your foam, you can use your fabric scissors to carefully trim away any of the extra fabric extending beyond your pin line. Now that our first piece of fabric is finished, we are ready to start building our spider web. Pick a point anywhere along the edge of the foam to add a marker pin. It really doesn't matter where you start this. And go ahead and place that marker pin about halfway into the foam. So you're going to put it here up along the edge, and you only have to push it in about halfway because we're going to remove it before the pattern is over, and this will help us place our pieces for the spider web. Now you're going to measure 3 1/4 inches down to the left from this top marker pin. So using your flexible tape measure, and you're going along the left when you're looking at it from the front of the ornament. You're going to start at that marker pin and measure 3 1/4 inches, and right at that 3 1/4 inch mark, you're going to place a second marker pin. So now you've got 2 marker pins there, one at the top and one down to the left. And now we'll start adding your spider web. So using your cord or your skinny ribbon, whatever you want to use to construct your spider web, lay the edge of your cord right up against that top marker pin, and keeping it just to the right of that marker pin is going to keep us lined up. And you want to leave some ribbon extending past the pin. You're going to pin in line with the pin line that you already have going here, but if you keep the end of your ribbon too close to that pin, as you pull, it might pull through. So make sure you leave a little bit of ribbon or cord extending beyond that pin so that it's nice and secure. And now you're going to bring this cord down to the bottom side of this second marker pin that you placed. And again, you're going to pin right in that same pin line, keeping your cord just touching that marker pin, pin in the pin line, and then when you trim, leave a little bit extra beyond the pin so that your ribbon doesn't pull out of place. And now you have added your first piece of that spider web. And now we're going to add a few more marker pins to help us line up our next parts of the spider web. And when you're looking at the side of your foam, you're always measuring to the right of the marker pin that you just placed, or if you're looking at the front, you're going counterclockwise. So using your flexible tape measure, starting at that second marker pin, you're going to measure 7/8 of an inch to the right of that marker pin and place another one. And you're gonna want a total of 6 marker pins down here at the bottom. So go ahead and do that 4 more times. You're measuring to the right of the pin you just placed by 7/8 of an inch and placing another marker pin until you have a total of 6 down here along the bottom. All right, down here at the bottom edge of where our spider web will be, we have 6 marker pins and they're each 7/8 of an inch apart. And we're just going to repeat the same process we did with the first piece with each of these marker pins. So starting back up at the top in the very same spot, keeping your cord or your ribbon just to the right of that top marker pin, pin it right there in that same spot, and these are going to start to pile up a little, so you can move just to the right if you want, but basically you're pinning in that same spot the entire time. And now you're going to work with this second marker pin down here, just bringing your cord or your ribbon down to the right edge of that second bottom marker pin. Make sure you pull so that your cord or your ribbon is laying nice and flat. Pin in line with all of your other pins, and then when you trim, leave a little extra so that it doesn't pull through the edge. And now you're just going to repeat this for those remaining 4 marker pins. So starting up here at the top, you want to line up your cord and pin. Bring it down to the right edge of your next marker pin. Pin in place and trim. Go ahead and repeat that process for the next 3 marker pins, adding 3 more strings of your spider web. And once you've added all 6 vertical pieces of your spider web, you can go ahead and remove all of the marker pins on your foam, including that top one. You don't need that top one anymore either. And now we're going to add the pieces that move across your spider web. Before we add these pieces, it's a good idea to prep your pins by threading them with your clear crystal beads. We're going to be using these clear crystal beads on your pin to pin these next pieces of ribbon in place. So it's just nice to already have the beads threaded onto the pin. So go ahead and do that now. And once you have your pins threaded with your crystal beads, you can set those aside to have them ready to use as we're adding your next pieces of ribbon. For our first horizontal piece, it's going to be pinned 1 inch away from the edge of the foam. So starting here on the first left vertical piece of our spider web, I'm measuring down from the edge of the foam, not from the point where it's pinned, just from the point where the spider web is touching the edge of the flat side of the foam. And right here at this 1 inch mark is where we want to pin our cord. And you can leave a little bit extra off to the left. We'll just trim it up when we're finished. But right there, 1 inch down along the first piece of the spider web, I'm pinning my cord in place, pinning through both pieces, the cord that's already there and the cord that I'm adding. And now you're going to do the same thing all the way across. So just measuring 1 inch down from the edge of the foam for each of these pieces. Move my cord up to that 1 inch mark and use my embellished pin to hold it in place. Now just repeat that all the way across. And once you have it pinned down at all 6 points, you should see that it curves a little bit. If you want to adjust any of the pieces to make that curve a little more prominent, you can go ahead and do that. It's easier to do that with this top piece. Make the curve that you want, because then all of these bottom pieces will be based off that top piece, and that just makes it a little bit easier. So if there's any adjusting you want to do, make things a little more equally spaced out, you can go ahead and do that. And then you're just going to trim your cord off as close to the pin as you can. So I'm just pulling my pin up a little here and getting the bead out of the way, and then just trimming off any extra little bits of cord that I have. Same on the right side, you need your long piece left over, so you can move that pin and bead out of the way and just trim your cord as close as you can get it. And now you've added your first horizontal piece of your spider web. And now we're just going to repeat that process a few more times. So for this second row, you're just going to measure down 1 inch from the pieces that you just placed and repeat those exact same steps. So just measuring down 1 inch from the pin that I placed on the previous row is where I'm going to start my next piece of my spider web. And of course, use your embellished pins to hold that in place. And you'll just repeat that for each piece. And again, just trim off that last bit as close to your pins as you can get it. And if there's any adjustments you want to make, you can go ahead and do that now. And now we just have one more horizontal row to add, and you can really see how that spider web is forming now. And for this first left piece of this final row, we aren't going to be using a beaded pin because it's actually going to fall off the side of the ornament. So again, measuring down 1 inch from the bead that you just placed on that same piece. My 1 inch mark falls down here on the edge of the foam, so I'm just going to pin it with a regular pin in the edge of the foam, and then we can bring it up here and repeat our 1 inch pattern all the way across. So on each piece, measuring 1 inch down and pinning our piece right there with a beaded pin. Be careful when you're pinning near the edge of your hemi. You want to angle it in toward the rounded side, because if you accidentally poke through this corner, you could poke yourself with your pin, and we don't want that. Once you've pinned that all the way across, you can trim off your cord next to that pin for the last time. And now you've added your spider web to the front of your ornament. Before we make and add our little spider, let's cover the back side of the foam with our other fabric pieces. We're going to cover the rounded side of your hemi with 5 inch squares of fabric number 2 using the parasol pattern or the flutter fold. So hold your square on the diagonal with the pattern side facing away from you and fold it in half so that the top point meets the bottom point, and crease that fold. And now fold it in half the opposite way and crease to find the center of the piece. Unfold And now you're going to place a pin just to the left of that center crease and a hair below the top folded edge. I know the center crease is kind of hard to see on my dark fabric, but it's right here at that fold. I'm going about 1/4 of an inch to the left of that crease and pinning just below the top folded edge of my piece. And now we're going to use that point that we made on the back of our ornament, and you don't necessarily need the lines. You just want to pin right into the point where they cross, because that's the very center of the rounded side of our foam. Now you are going to bring the folded edge of your fabric down along the ornament. It doesn't need to be along a line, but I'm going to put it along this line just to cover it up so we aren't confused by it. So I'm bringing this folded edge down along the rounded side of my ornament, and I'm tugging on it a little bit so that it lays nice and flat over the foam. You don't have to pull super hard and stretch or distort your fabric, but you want it to lay nice and flat. And now you're going to place a pin, and I like to pin just above that pin line that I already created, because when we trim this off, that gives us a little extra room. So I'm just pinning right above the pins that are already there. And now we're going to create our pleats. So you have 2 layers of fabric over here to the right. You're going to pinch just the top layer. So the bottom layer of my piece is still down there. I'm not doing anything with it. Pinch the corner of this top layer of fabric and bring it down to the left, and that is creating this next pleat that you see here. You can see that laying down on the next piece of fabric. And before you pin it in place, you want to make sure that your pleat is offset by about 1/2 an inch. So the edge of my new pleat is right here. I'm measuring from the edge of the previous piece, this previous folded edge, and it is over by 1/2 an inch. So once you get that in place, just pin along that folded edge within your pin line there. And now you've added your first pleat. And to straighten it out a little, you can just tug to the right on your fabric a little bit. And now we're going to repeat that. So pinch just the top layer of fabric over here at the right, bring it down to the left, creating this next pleat. Make sure your folded edge is offset by 1/2 an inch, and you don't have to measure every time. You can eyeball it. It's just helpful to measure for those first few to get the hang of right where 1/2 an inch is, and pin it in place. And I'll show you on my other ornament, it might be a little easier to see in this fabric. You can see how these pleats start overlapping each other, and keeping them consistent 1/2 inch all the way around just gives you that nice, consistent finished look, and you cover the whole rounded side of your hemi. Now we just have one more pleat to make with this piece of fabric, but instead of just pinching the top layer, you're going to pinch the entire piece and just fold this new folded edge over to the left to create your final pleat. And you still want to offset by 1/2 an inch. Pin that down along the folded edge, and then also smooth this corner over to the right and pin. And now you've completed your first flutter fold for the back of your ornament. Let's prep another piece of fabric and repeat that process. With another square of fabric number 2, hold this diagonally with the pattern side facing away from you and fold it in half so that the top point meets the bottom point, and crease the fold. Fold in half the opposite way and crease to find the center. Unfold and place a pin just about 1/4 of an inch to the left of that center crease and just a hair below the top folded edge. Now moving to the right of the piece we just placed, you're pinning that into the very top center of the ornament again, and this time this folded edge is going to create your next pleat. So you want the folded edge to come down along the ornament and land 1/2 an inch away from the previous folded edge from your final pleat. So that is right here. I have 1/2 an inch between my 2 folded edges. Pin that in place in your same pin line along the folded edge. And now we're just going to do the exact same thing. So pinch just the top layer of fabric, bring it down to the left, offsetting by 1/2 inch, and pin. Pinch just the top layer again, bring it down, offsetting by 1/2 inch, and pin. And then pinch this entire piece off to the right, fold it down to the left, creating your final pleat with this piece of fabric. Offset those folded edges by 1/2 inch and pin, and then smooth this right corner out and pin it into the foam as well. Repeat that process 3 more times, continuing to add flutter folds all the way around your ornament, and we'll come back and work together when we have just 1 more piece to add. Once you've added a total of 5 pieces to the back of your ornament and you just have 1 more left to add, unpin the first few pleats of your first flutter fold and carefully fold those over to the right out of the way, and this will give us room to finish off our final flutter fold. So go ahead and add your final piece as usual. And once that final piece is added, you're just going to carefully return your first few pleats back into place, and they're going to overlap that final piece to make sure that no foam is showing. And remember to just pin down each of those pleats. And once you have all of those fabric pieces in place, you can use your fabric scissors to very, very carefully trim away the fabric extending beyond your pins. And as you do this, you want to be extremely careful that you aren't accidentally getting under any of your fabric or ribbon pieces from side 1, because you don't want to accidentally cut those and ruin all of your hard work. So just take your time, be nice and careful. And once you have finished trimming all of that fabric up, we can add a band to cover all of these raw edges and pins. So with your long strip of fabric number 2, fold this in thirds lengthwise, and you only need to fold the first few inches at a time. You can fold the rest as you go. And as you're folding, you just want to make sure that you're keeping it wide enough that when it is on your ornament, it's going to cover all of those raw edges and pins. So once you fold it in thirds, flip it over so that the raw edges are facing away from you, and choose where you want the top center of your ornament to be. You can keep the center of your spiderweb right there at the top, or you can offset it a little. I think I'm gonna turn mine so that my spiderweb starts a little to the left, and I'm going to make this the top of my ornament. So just lay your band along the top of your ornament, covering the raw edges and pins and keeping one folded edge in line with the edge of the foam. And just use 2 pins to hold that in place. And now, keeping your band folded in thirds, you're going to wrap it all the way around the ornament this way, covering those raw edges and pins. So as you wrap, you can keep the folded edge in line with the edge of the foam, and you're covering all of the raw edges and pins as you go to get that nice finished look on your ornament. And you want to pull kind of tightly so that your fabric lays nice and smooth, but you don't need to pull so tight that you're distorting the pattern on your fabric. So just take your time, make sure that band looks nice. And when you return to the starting point, right at that same spot, use 2 more pins to hold your band in place and trim off any extra fabric extending beyond your pins. And now that you have added all of your fabric pieces, we'll start making your spider. To create your spider, you're going to want your 2 bigger black beads, your black seed beads, your pieces of wire, and some wire cutters and pliers for bending them. My wire was crafting wire covered with brown paper, so I used a Sharpie to color it black just so that it blends in a little more, but you can use any color of wire just as long as it's thin enough and bendable and can still hold your beads. I have a little bit shorter piece than 6 inches here. If you weren't able to get 5 6-inch pieces, use your shorter one for the body. And you're just going to start by bending over the tip. And my pliers are kind of thick here, so if you have like little jewelry pliers, that might work a little better. But you're just bending it over so that the bead won't fall off the end. And once you have folded that over, you're going to add the bead for your body. So I have a large round black bead here. If you're using a teardrop shaped bead, put the wider end of the bead down here at the bottom where that loop is. And now you can just go ahead and set this aside. And now we'll start creating the legs. So with another piece of wire, go ahead and bend over the top so that your beads don't fall off. And once you have that bent over to keep your beads secured, you're just going to start threading your wire with your little black seed beads. And the amount you're going to use is going to change depending on how big they are. You want about 1.5 inches worth of beads. So mine are pretty tiny here. I'm just scooping them onto the wire and moving them down to the end. And you want to keep doing that until you have 1.5 inches worth of those little beads down there. All right, so as you can see here, I threaded enough beads on my wire that the beaded section is about 1.5 inches long. And you're just going to repeat that for your remaining 3 pieces of wire. Fold the end over and then thread 1.5 inches worth of seed beads onto that wire. I'm not gonna make you guys sit here and watch me do that, so go ahead and take the time to thread your beads on and then meet me back here to do the next step of your spider. All right, once you have those 4 pieces threaded with your little seed beads, these are the start of the first 4 legs of your spider. So you're going to hold these together so that the beads are starting at the same point, and you can just give them one good twist there to hold all these wire pieces together. So now you have your 4 legs twisted together, and to add them to the body, you're going to use your piece of wire that you have your bead on that makes up the body, and you're just going to wrap that wire around the set of 4 pieces for the legs here. So you want to make sure that's nice and tight. Wrapping that wire all the way around so that now the body is attached to these leg pieces. And once you have the body attached to the legs, you're now going to finish threading on the other 4 legs. So just untangle your 4 pieces of wire here, and again repeat that same process, threading each of them with your seed beads until there's about 1.5 inches worth of beads on each of these 4 pieces. So go ahead and do that now. Once you have 1.5 inches worth threaded onto one leg, you're gonna want to fold over the end to secure those beads just like before. So trim off your wires so that you have about 1/2 or 1/4 of an inch of wire left above those beads, and then use your pliers to bend that over just like you did before at the beginning to keep those beads secured onto the end of the wire. And once you have those secured, you're just going to repeat that 3 more times so that you have a total of 4 legs on the right side with 1.5 inches of beads and secured with a loop at the end of the wire. Alrighty, once you have threaded all 4 of those remaining legs, we just need to add the head. So on this piece of wire that is left over from adding the body, you're just going to thread the bead you're using for your head on there. And then use the same technique to trim off this wire and add a loop to keep that secured on there. And with that, you've created your little spider, and now you can bend his legs. If you bend them up and then back down, they really start to look like little spider legs there. And now you can add him to your ornament. And to do this, I have some black pins that I'm going to use. These aren't completely necessary, they're just nice because they blend in, but you could use regular silver pins, or you could even thread them with beads or use black pearl head pins. But you're just gonna put your spider, figure out where you want him on your ornament, and then you can pin down through these wire loops that you made to help keep him in place. You can do that on his body pieces, his head piece, and his legs if you would like, to just help hold him down and keep him where you want him. Alrighty, and once you've got your spider added on there, we just have a couple more pieces to add. We're going to add the hangers so that you can hang your ornament. With a 10-inch piece of hanger string, put the ends together and tie a knot. Now thread a pin with your final crystal bead followed by a bead cap and pin that right through the knot on your hanger string. And then you can move your string to the sides of that bead cap, and this is going to be pinned right over the raw edges of your band. So that's covering up that last raw edge and pins and giving you a perfect way to hang your Halloween ornament. With that, your Itsy Bitsy Spider ornament is finished. I hope you guys had a really great time making this along with me. I can't wait to see how all of your adorable Halloween ornaments turn out. Thanks so much for watching.